My last video showed how USB mice can now be connected to the C64 Ultimate with the latest firmware update. That video got some good feedback, and I felt that a follow-up video was important to address some things that weren't covered in the first one and give some information that might be important for people that don't own an Ultimate and have an original C64 like this one, the C64C, and how you can do some of the things that I showed in that video with original hardware. But C64 Ultimate users should also watch this video, especially to the end, because we're also going to get a glimpse at some other mice that weren't covered in the first video, as well as look at options where perhaps the mice that didn't work so well on the USB connection can work well through the joystick port. And to do this, we're going to take a look at two different USB to DB9 adapters. So we have a MouSTer and a Tikus. There's also an adapter called the Micro Tom that does the same thing. One quick comment: the Malay and Indonesian word for mouse is actually pronounced Tikus, and it's spelled like it's pronounced Tikus, which is the name of this device. So I think that's where Lotharic got the inspiration for the device. So I'm just going to pronounce it Tikus. Along with the MouSTer and the Micro Tom, they connect to the DB9 joystick ports of C64s, Amigas, and Atari STs and allow USB devices to be connected. Now, this particular Tikus was an original one that shipped with the tank mouse with the Kickstarter, and it only works with mice. But on Lotharic's website, you can find a new version, looks identical. However, that new version works with joysticks, gamepads, and keyboards. So you might want to consider that. Notice that the current tank mouse on Sordin ships with Micro Tom. So I'm pretty sure that the Tikus is a good proxy of how Micro Tom would perform in these tests that I'm going to show you. Make sure that you set up each of these devices specifically for the C64. Each of them have their own way to do it, so check your instruction manual. For the MouSTer, it uses an INI file. I'm going to show you the two lines that I changed in my INI file before I had it set up for Amiga to work with the C64. For the Tikus, it has a special boot sequence. With the computer off, insert the Tikus with a USB mouse connected. Power on your C64, wait for the green LED, immediately press the right mouse button, then press the left mouse button to change the number of times the red LED is blinking. When it's blinking 3 times, press the right mouse button to save the configuration. That will set it to C64 mode. For today's tests, I'm going to be using GUI64 again, but instead of the version that I used in my previous video, which was pulled off the very second USB drive that came with the Commodore 64 Ultimate, I'm going to be using the newest version that's on the GitHub page for this project. If you have a C64 Ultimate, it allows automatic saving of the settings, such as color, desktop pattern, and the icon positions in your flash folder, and it also displays the correct time from the Ultimate. Today's test will check each mouse with both the MouSTer and the Tikus for precision and jitter. Also, I'm going to use a different mouse pad. A user commented that the red portion of the chicken lips here could have affected lag and jitter when those mice crossed that color. So we're getting rid of this, and we're going to get the lead out. So a little Led Zeppelin today, and get the lead out. Actually, back in the day, probably in the 80s, there was a radio station here in Chicago called WLUP, and there used to be a segment from time to time called Get the Lead Out. It was just a block of Led Zeppelin songs. It was absolutely awesome. I know there's a couple red portions on this mouse pad, but they're way out of the scroll zone, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. Let's get started. One thing that's very important is to make sure that these devices are plugged in when the computer is off. There is a definite disclaimer on the Microtom, so it's probably true for all of them, that plugging in these devices while the computer is on can electrically damage the C64. So you don't want to blow out your joystick ports or any chips inside, so be safe. Our first device is the 8-bit DOE N30 mouse, the NES styled mouse. I have the MouSTer plugged in. Let's see. If you watched my C64 Ultimate video, I noticed that this mouse was very laggy. I described it as moving underwater, and it's a much smoother experience with the MouSTer. It's not lagging. And let's try our jitter test. It's moving horizontally, tracking very well, much better than the direct connection to the back of the Ultimate. That is interesting. Our button does work. And it looks okay. I don't think that this is an issue. I've got the Tikus plugged in along with the receiver for the N30. And watch what happens. So as soon as GUI 64 is active, the pointer is just jumping around. Now the mouse is off. I'm going to turn it on. It is on. You can move it, but it's just jumping around. Now, in all fairness, on Lotharic's site, it does say that the original version of the Tikus was made specifically for the tank mouse, and other mice may work with it. So obviously the N30 will not work with the original version of the Tikus. The new version, which is more expandable, I'm sure will give a different result. Next up, the Logitech M325C. The receiver's plugged into the MouSTer. It is moving. Precision is good. Let's try jitter. It's working fine. Once again, no jumps, tracking well. The Logitech also has the same problem as the N30 with the Tikus. The pointer is just jumping all over the place without any motion from the mouse. I think the Tikus, the original version of the Tikus, is very, very particular about which mice it'll work with. Now, once again, Lotharic did say that the newest version is way more compatible, so I don't think it'll have this problem. But if you own a tank mouse, the original Kickstarter version, your Tikus is probably dialed in just for that mouse. And I am going to skip the rest of the Tikus evaluations with these other mice because I don't think it's fair to evaluate the Tikus based on that original version. Right now, I think the MouSTer is your safest bet. Next up, we have our Keytronic wired mouse. This is the Model 2 Mouse U1L, optical. So there's our mouse, moving nicely. Good control of the precision. And let's do our jitter test. Similar to the other two, really no issues. Tracking well horizontally, no up and down jitter. Yeah, it's working well. Next up, we have our Cherry Mouse. It's by the same company that does the keyboard switches. Let's see how it does. Nice movement again. Precision is good. Really no issues selecting anything where I want the mouse to be. Let's look at our jitter test. Same as the other mice that we saw earlier. No issues at all, no jumping. It's tracking very well. So far, the MouSTer is really performing well with these mice. It's time to go back to our mouse, the mouse, which shipped with the A500 Mini. Now, when I tried this with the C64 Ultimate connected to the joystick port, there were times where the mouse seemed to stop responding. It would just kind of freeze momentarily. And, I felt that that was a problem, and it was either due to the MouSTer or maybe how the mouse was working with it. And somebody made a comment that it was perhaps due to this portion of the mouse pad. That part of the chicken lips design is red and might have confused the laser. So that's why we've got the lead out, and we're going to see what happens. Oh, see, it is stuck. That mouse just stopped there at the edge. There, it stopped again. And it jumped. See, it definitely is not tracking correctly. It is just stopping at random. So it was not the chicken lips, unless it doesn't like Led Zeppelin. And that's blasphemous. Everyone should love Led Zeppelin. This mouse seems to have a little bit of a tracking issue, so I can't really recommend it. Now it's time for the tank mouse. As you may recall, the tank mouse originally shipped with the first version of the Tikus. This time, we're starting with the MouSTer, not its native pairing. I did want to mention that some people had commented, and I also saw this, that sometimes this mouse has trouble going to sleep and will just discharge your batteries if you don't turn it off. You might want to take that into consideration. It's now on. The green laser. So I do have some nice motion here. No real issues with our precision. Same thing, as I noticed on the C64 Ultimate, there seems to be a little bit of space where it's not laggy, but it doesn't seem to have the full range of motion that I'm expecting with this fast horizontal movement. See, right there. Yeah, and there again, you might have seen it real quick. It kind of stayed towards the right edge of the screen, even though my back and forth motion was pretty consistent. I did notice that on the Ultimate, and it was only with the joystick port. It functioned pretty well when the USB receiver was attached to the USB port on the back of the Ultimate. So this might be something with this particular connection using the DB9. I have the Logitech Marble Mouse plugged into the MouSTer, and even before I start, I'm going to say I don't recommend this. Have you seen the prices of how much this thing costs now? It's insane. No one should ever spend this much money on a pointing device. No way. But let's see how it performs. The mouse is tracking well. Of course, you're not going to have the full range of motion as a regular mouse, just because the trackball does require, quite a bit of pushing to get it to where it wants to go, or you need it to go. Precision is the same, to be expected. I'm not a trackball user, so I'm sure that other people are faster at working this device. I can't even move across the screen. That's how far you have to roll the trackball to get it going. So I don't think that you would have any problem with jitter, just because you're limited as to the range of motion. But moving it as far as I can, and the ball's even popping out of the receptacle, it seems fine. Next up, I have two mice that weren't considered in the original video. These are Apple desktop bus mice. This is the original one, and this is the ADB Mouse 2. And the reason I didn't show them is because I didn't realize that they made ADB to USB adapters. But somebody had commented that they used one with the C64 Ultimate, and it does work. And yeah, I mean, they have this nice retro color, the beige, that goes back to the C64. It has only one mouse button, so that might be important later if second mouse button functionality is added. And these are mechanical mice, so they do have the roller ball that's going to pick up lint and dirt that need to be maintained from time to time, but it will give you that authentic retro feeling. You do have the Apple logo that's embossed in both of these mice. If you don't mind, that's not bad. And I just want to throw out that the ADB mouse, the original one, is kind of shaped like a C128 or an Amiga 500 when you look at it from the sides. Yeah, there's some Commodore vibes still here. The GUI 64 does have a Mac version of the interface, and that's available not on the cartridge that came with your C64 Ultimate, but on the project page. Our next mouse also wasn't shown in the original video. Somebody had commented that 8-Bit Dough makes a Commodore style mouse. It's the R8, but they had problems with it. apparently it was injecting keyboard presses like space whenever it was used, which is unfortunate, but I decided to get one just to try it out because there's a few things that will make this mouse interesting. And for you C64 Ultimate users, I'm going to try it with the USB port as well as the Tikus and MouSTer, so hang in there. Special features, it's got a very good sensor, a charging dock that can be used as a signal extension, programmable buttons on the side for customized control, DPI adjustment. That's where I'm going to see if we can dial down that DPI as low as possible. There's a program that you run on your PC that you can get into the settings and really make some custom changes. I'm thinking with a low enough DPI, it won't have that jitter. Also left and right hand mode switching. And of course, since it is made for the C64 keyboard that they have, it should match the aesthetic. So this is going to be an unboxing, and we'll see what's inside and give it a spin. So the color definitely will match the bread bin C64. It feels very light. 2 side buttons. It's a pairing button on the side of the bottom, along with a selector for the 2.4G receiver and a Bluetooth mode. Looks like a USB-C at the top, clicky scroll wheel. I understand this is the DPI selection. The top is not a button, but down here it is. Nice clicks. Here's the dock. Along with some instructions. The Commodore motif here, the rainbow stripes. A place for what I assume to be the USB dongle. Another USB-C connection here. Looks like it sits flat on your desk and the mouse just attaches that way. And it looks like it's magnetic, but it's really not that strong. You can see it just falls off vertically, but it is sticking unless you have it all the way upside down. There's the receiver. It was just tucked right underneath. Let's try it. I'm going to shut off the C64C and I'm going to switch back to our colorful Windows version of GUI 64 and plug this receiver into our MouSTer and give it a shot. Have the receiver plugged into the MouSTer. But before we start, I did want to note that also included in the box in a little insert that I didn't open was a USB-A to USB-C cable, along with a paper instruction manual and replacement for these pads on the bottom that will eventually wear out just because those are the contact surfaces of this mouse and the mouse pad or whatever else you are sliding it on. That's kind of nice that you have a replacement for when it eventually wears out. I'm going to flip this to 2.4G. There's a light, an LED, that's now on. However, the mouse is not moving. This did come right out of the box. I'm not sure if it's fully charged. What I'm going to do is put it on the dock. We're going to let this charge a little bit and we'll come back and we'll take a look again. The mouse has been charging a while. I just plugged it into a power bank that I have sitting up here. This is a Nightcore 20,000 power bank. And I did find out that this USB-C connection here cannot be used to charge the mouse. You have to have it plugged into the base and then the mouse on the base, and then you'll see it breathing like that. So it should pair with the receiver that I have plugged in there. It is on 2G here. We turn it off and then back on again. The light is solid. Reading the manual, it does say that you may need to repair the adapter. I'm going to go through that. If the mouse loses connection with the adapter, you can try to repair it by following these steps. Turn the mode switch to 2.4G. Hold the pair button for 3 seconds to enter pairing mode. The status indicator will blink rapidly. Okay, we've got blinking. Connect the adapter to the USB port of your device. The status indicator will remain solid for 6 seconds, then go off. Still nothing. I just hit the DPI button, and yellow apparently is the lowest DPI, so it's on yellow now. But maybe that's because the MouSTer has a setting that's dividing the DPI and it's now too low for it to register. So it looks like the highest DPI is purple. Let's see if I can get it to purple. Looks like I'm only seeing red, green, and yellow. So red isn't even in the manual. But green is 1200. No, nothing. The laser is working. I can see reflection of a red light. Let's try the Tikus. Maybe that'll make a difference. I've got the Tikus plugged in. As soon as I turned on the C64, the mouse did respond. And look at this. The pointer is moving by itself. Super fast. Okay. It might be a DPI issue. I'm going to dial it down. I think yellow was the lowest, which is supposed to be 800, but it's still super fast. It's just jumping all over the place. What I'm going to do is take this mouse to my PC, run the actual, they call it the ultimate utility, and dial down the DPI and see if that works. Now, before I reconfigure the R8 mouse, I also read in the manual that it can work in wired mode, and that's why we have a USB-C port here that doesn't charge the mouse. It's actually used for control. So I've got the cable that came with the device that had USB-A on one side and USB-C on the other. I've got the USB-A plugged into the MouSTer, connecting it to the device. Oh, it also says to turn it off. So it is off and it's not working. Oh, the light is blinking or breathing as if it's charging. That's interesting. So I'm going to reboot the C64C. Bring it back up. So no motion. It is off. According to the manual, that should make it act like a wired mouse. But it is not. Okay, well, time to see if, one, there's a firmware update for this. Two, you can dial down this DPI setting and we'll see what happens. Even after updating the firmware on the R8 and dialing down the DPS settings, still no responses. For this new mouse, I can't recommend it for the original C64 system through the MouSTer. I'm going to try it with the Ultimate and we'll see if that makes a difference, because my Windows PC did recognize the mouse both wired and through the receiver. So something is going on here. It does work, but there's some sort of disconnect either in the protocol or what the MouSTer is expecting from a connected device that makes this unrecognizable. I still like the tank mouse. The others do work fine with the MouSTer. I just like the look. Looks like a 1351. You do have to make sure you're okay with it being a little bit lighter in color. And I have its receiver plugged in there. And one more thing I'm going to do is exit. Someone also commented that the mice were making strange characters appear at the basic prompt. So it does not look like the tank mouse has that issue. Once again, if you do want a retro aesthetic to go with your system, the tank mouse seems to be the device to get. C64 Ultimate owners, hang in there. I'm going to switch my setup back to Ultimate mode and give this R8 one last look. Got the Ultimate set back up again. This is my port extension. I have the receiver for the 8-bit DOE R8 connected to port 1. I have our GUI 64 there ready. Device is on. Light is solid, showing that it's paired. So same thing. Nothing going on when the joystick port is used. So I'm going to power off the device. I'm going to take the receiver and I'm going to put it into one of the ports in the back of the Ultimate, and we will try a direct connection instead of going with the DB9 adapter, the MouSTer. Machine is back on, and I'm going to run our GUI 64. Oh, the mouse is moving, but it's just moving vertically. Let me turn it off and back on again. Same thing, it's just the y-axis. Now I did change the DPI settings and it is making a difference, so I also set a macro to this button to send a left shift F10 command, and that's supposed to bring up the Ultimate's menu. Oh, look at that. I'm getting horizontal movement when I press that button. Interesting. I wonder if there's a configuration. I did update the firmware as well. I wonder if something got messed up when I was programming the macro here. I'm going to take this back to my PC. I'm going to try to set it to the default values and come back here and see if I can get this working. I did remove all customizations by disabling every button except the left click. I also brought the polling rate as low as possible, which was 500. So I do still have the receiver plugged into the Ultimate. Go and turn on the mouse. Oh, look at that. Now somebody did say that the mouse was just putting spaces at the basic screen, and that's what's happening here. I'm going to turn off the mouse. Still going. I wonder if this receiver needs to be updated. I didn't see a firmware option or update option for the receiver. So let's reboot the machine and see if, see, I can't even do that because that space is going. So I have to use the rocker switch. I'm going to unplug the receiver and plug in the USB-A end of the mouse cable. mouse is off now. I'm going to plug this in and we'll try it as a wired mouse. No spaces, so that's good. Oh, there it goes. As soon as I move the mouse, it activated the space. Turn this off. And I'm going to get GUI 64 running before I move the mouse. No. It must be moving along. Okay. So luckily the mouse is hot pluggable. Or I should say the USB port is. Start it without the mouse. I'm going to plug the mouse in. See what happens here. So there's no pointer at all. Oh, there we go. So once again, it's just the vertical movement. I'm going to press the buttons again. So this time there's no horizontal movement of the pointer. But the mouse just moves up and down. And this works perfectly on the Windows system. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I did change some settings here where I can set it to yellow and it should be the lowest DPI. Oh, the mouse did move horizontally. So every time I'm pressing the DPI switch, that mouse is creeping to the right. But only the y-axis is being recognized and it's being mapped horizontally. If I move the mouse up and down, the pointer is more or less stable. But horizontal movement translates into vertical on-screen movement. Very strange. Well, for today's video, once again, 8-bit dough disappoints. Cannot recommend this, at least for the Ultimate. If you want a retro mouse for your PC, I guess it works. At least, you know, in my brief testing while I was updating the firmware and navigating to the 8-bit dough site with this mouse to download it, it worked fine. And it does work fine on a PC with the receiver as well as wired in, but it will not work on the Ultimate. It will not work on an original C64 with a MouSTer. So stay away from this if you're thinking you can get something that matches the C64 but has modern conveniences. This is not going to do it for you. Maybe there'll be a future firmware update that does make this a usable device. So I am going to hang on to it. I did purchase this. So we'll see what happens with this in the future. I also wanted to address another comment on the first video. This one was made by the author of GUI 64, who noted that each program on the C64 may handle the mouse differently, and that really maybe a test on GEOS or game would be a really nice way to evaluate these mice. So I'm just going to do a really quick run through. It's not going to be too detailed. It's just going to be a piece of video and then pass or fail on the screen for you guys. And we're going to check out these mice on GEOS. with both the normal movement and the jitter test. And then the game I picked is Operation Wolf. There are some versions of Operation Wolf, not all of them, that support the 1351. The others just have the Neo mouse as an option. So we're going to do the 1351 version of Operation Wolf. Now, I want to make a comment here. Operation Wolf requires a mouse in port 2. So the MouSTer is going to have to be in port 2, but we don't have the option. If you use the USB port, it will be stuck on USB 1. So if you have a game that requires a mouse and joystick port 2, unless you have a MouSTer or a Tikus or a Microtom, you're not going to be able to use that mouse. So that's another advantage right now of using one of these DB9 to USB devices. It will give you that flexibility that just using the USB port that's standard on the Ultimate doesn't have. Let's get started, and we'll get a quick summary at the end of what I think is the best mouse after both these videos. One comment about GEOS. Somebody might be wondering, well, can't you do a preference adjustment to make the mouse work a little bit better? Although there are some settings here, they really don't affect the performance very much. I've got the tank mouse, and the tank mouse is a little bit slow. It's already at max velocity and acceleration. Minimum velocity isn't set too high, so I'm going to crank it all the way up. And I really can't tell a big difference. It's still a little bit laggy compared to the other pointing devices. You let the system finish loading before I move the mouse. It might be slightly better, but it's definitely not as snappy. that I'd like a mouse to be. Now, the opposite might be true for the mice that worked a little bit faster than I'd like. I'm going to get the Logitech mouse, which was a good example of that, and we'll see what happens. I've got the Logitech mouse ready to go, and it's really sensitive. It starts jittering as soon as I move it what I think to be a reasonable amount. Back into the preference. Moving the mouse very slow in order to control it. Cranking everything down. Gonna let all the disk activity to finish. Still, we've got that jitter if the mouse moves a little bit too fast. And there might be a slight difference in making it slow down a little bit, but it's still very quick. You really got to move the mouse slow for fine control. If this was a Windows machine and I move the mouse as I would typically do on my desktop, you're going to get a little bit of jitter. Yes, you might be able to do some slight changes through preferences, but basically how the pointer was moving in the demo was pretty much how it's going to move, no matter what the preferences are set to. Well, I think we've learned that you really need to choose what your use is before you decide on a mouse. If it's for gaming, I think you really need a MouSTer, a Tikus, or a Micro Tom, just so you have the flexibility of moving between ports. For gaming, I think the Tank mouse was fine. And surprisingly, I think the N30 also was fine too. I didn't feel that lag, that underwater lag that was present in both GEOS and GUI 64. But it does trouble me that it does have that. So there might be a program that you do have a mouse use later that you didn't try out now, and you find out that it really isn't appropriate. So I probably would shy away from that too. The devices that are definitely out, the R8 mouse concept is great, and I did some research, and it's presenting a very complex HID profile to the host device. This sensor is a very high capability gaming sensor. It'll work on clear surfaces like glass. It's got a very high polling rate and DPI, and I think it's just confusing the Ultimate and the MouSTer because it wasn't designed for this type of device. Maybe there'll be a firmware update in the future that will help, either on the MouSTer where it will support or ignore all those extraneous signals coming from this device so it will work, or maybe some firmware for the device itself. But for now, don't waste your money buying it. It will not work. This trackball I'm not recommending because of the price. However, if you do have a different trackball and you're used to operating a trackball, it might be something that you want to consider. You won't run into the jitter problem just because the range of motion isn't there. And it performed fine in GEOS. Once again, try it out. But I just can't recommend it as far as this particular model and the price. The Logitech, it was really iffy in a lot of these tests. Can't recommend it either. Good look. If you have a smaller hand, it works fine, but performance-wise, it just wasn't there. Same thing with the mouse. This is the Retro Games Limited mouse that came with the A500 Mini. Won't work at all with the USB, and even with the MouSTer, it was touch and go, so that's a no. Tronic and Cherry, they're both about equivalent as far as performance-wise. In GEOS, it was fine if you're using the desktop. If you're going to move fast, it's not going to work out that well with the USB. You'll get that jumping around. Using with the MouSTer, a little bit better, but still not quite there. Tank mouse, I think, still feels like the most all-around device that is workable. In GEOS, it was a little jumpy, but if you move with a normal range and you don't slide it too fast, it's fine. It works pretty much the same with the MouSTer or in the back. Although with the MouSTer, I think we can kind of tweak it a little bit better by changing some settings in the MouSTer.ini, maybe dialing the DPI divider a little bit more cleaner, so it'll behave a little bit better. But it's got the look of a 1351. It's wireless for convenience, a little bit lighter, like I said before, with the matching of the case, but I think overall it's a good device. So once again, you got to look at your use. If you're looking at games, I don't think any of these mice will do it. It's just too unpredictable when you have to move fast where your pointing device or your target is going to end up. That leaves productivity like GEOS or maybe a desktop GUI 64 type situation. And for that, the Tank mouse would be fine. I hope this helped you sort through all these different options. I hope it saved you time. I hope it saved you money. And it was really interesting adding USB support to the C64U. I'm sure there'll be another firmware update coming up. We'll revisit this should it affect the USB port and mice. But until then, take some time this week to reboot and remember the past.